were heard and that voted counts. So that's something we should all be very proud of. On the other hand, they had to be resilient, and that was unfortunate. We obviously saw and noted as an observer mission delayed poll openings, not always having materials available, some confusion. And so while the people were resilient, the election administration process was not as smooth and not as transparent and not as effective as it can be and as it should be.
Thanks so much. What improvements can be made? I'm hesitant to use the United States as an example, but I guess we can. In the United States, elections there are disaggregated at the state level, and so each individual state in the United States handles their own election operations. Should that be repeated? Is that a bridge too far? What are the improvements that can be made for INEC to be more efficient?
Well, so every country, every state, every community is different, right, in terms of the details, but it's the broad underlying principles that count most. And I think what we see here as a challenge is that there wasn't a dry run, there wasn't a test run done, there wasn't a stress test run done, so that we would have seen in advance some of the problems that were reported on election day. So I think it's insufficient planning, quite frankly. But most importantly, it's transparency. People in this country are hungry for democracy. The fact that you're covering these stories means that the media is hungry for democracy and elections and voting. And I think INEC would be well served to be 100% transparent all the time. So on election day, if there are problems that pop up, simply hold a press conference or put out a statement saying, look, here's the problem, this is why, and this is how long it will take to fix it. I think when there's silence, that creates a vacuum, and then people get fearful. They start to get suspicious. And so I think one of the most important things is for INEC to be transparent and to constantly be sharing whatever results they have, sharing whatever problems they see with journalists and with the public.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Green. Now, one thing that you pointed out that's crucial is communication. And we have definitely seen that, at least from what analysts have said, that INEC has not necessarily done the best job in terms of the pace of communication, in terms of how quickly matters are being addressed. We just saw something happen at the Coalition Center, even though people were told that that's not the place to, make your issues known. That's strictly a Coalition Center. And we also see that when it comes to uploading the results on the IREV, that's not being done real time. So how much grace should we actually give and how much understanding should we actually give INEC regarding this communication aspect that leaves so much room for speculation?
Well, and I think that last point that you just made is the key one. So anybody who administers elections, INEC or those who administer it in the United States, you don't have to have all of the answers in order to communicate and be transparent with the public. Instead, simply be honest about what you're facing. So if you've got particular problems, if you've got shortages, simply say, we have shortages. People are understanding. People are patient. It's when nothing is said that people start to fear the worst. They get suspicious, and in some cases, there isn't a reason to be suspicious. I think what we would say is that so many of the misunderstandings could be avoided by simply saying things publicly. I'd like to go back to something that you said, and it's very, very important. I would never say that the U.S. and our democracy has all the answers. What I often say is, look, as a democracy that's still learning, perhaps we've made all the mistakes. You don't have to make the mistakes that we have made. You can learn from our own experience of mistakes. Close friend of Nigeria, U.S.-Nigeria relations are very solid. We share democratic values, so we can learn from each other. That's why we're here as election observers.
Ambassador Green, I just wanted to follow up on something you said, where you said democracy is a journey. Are you giving INEC a bit of a pass? Because, to be frank here, how hard really is it to administer these elections? We're talking about a logistics exercise where you simply have to provide set materials. You've had 4 years to prepare because these elections happen every 4 years. You talked about insufficient planning, for example. Is it really that hard, Ambassador Green? Is it really that difficult? Should we be here?
Well, what I can say is that the NDI-IRI Joint Observer Mission, we actually did 2 pre-election assessments as well last year. And what we noted is that doing a test run, doing a stress run would be a great way to avoid the problems. And I think that's one of the things that should have been done. We look at this as a missed opportunity. There was a good opportunity here to advance democracy in ways that the Nigerian citizens could be proud of. Clearly, the Nigerian people are strong believers in democracy. We saw it at the polls. But unfortunately, the administration fell short. And so what we would say is, let's learn from the lessons. It is important. This was a missed opportunity. And let's make sure that as this story continues to be written of democracy, we learn these lessons and we're honest with each other on the shortcomings that we've all seen.
All right, Ambassador Green, in your joint statement released with Her Excellency President Joyce Banda, you noted that the election fell well short of Nigerian citizens' reasonable expectations. Now, on election day, the word voter disenfranchisement was being thrown around a lot. What are your observations? Would you go as far as to call what you witnessed on election day, what you observed on election day, as disenfranchisement?
Well, what I can say, and it's obviously in our statement, that we observed a number of situations where voters felt as though they were disenfranchised because either of the fallout from the cash crisis or confusion over voter lists or polls opening up late or the BVAS system not working as well as it should have. All of those together clearly hurt the involvement of voters. So to that extent, I would say that it hurt the participation of Nigerians in the election process.
Ambassador Green, if you're planning a wedding, you outsource that to a wedding planner. If you're planning a dinner, you outsource it to a caterer. I run a business show on the Arise Television on the broadcast, and we talk a lot about privatization and government getting out of the way of the private enterprise. Can